Hi, good morning, parents. Very happy Deepavali to one and all. Thank you for sharing your precious Saturday morning with us. Yeah, very simple slides. I must say, I have a very good team this year, comprising Chair Jacqueline and May, who give me a lot of feedback based on the materials that we produce. And together, I, they're very competent, and I don't really have to breathe down anybody's neck. And whatever I write, they are very proficient at carrying out the lessons. So I'm very thankful that they're with us this year. Right, primary science. If you have attended some of my previous workshops, some of the contents might be repeated somewhat. All right, I won't go through all the details, but this is essentially the thought process behind the design of every science lesson. We make use of the 5 E's teaching approach: engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. When we first started, it was very difficult to have the explore function because we were writing solely for online learning. So we all know that in science, you will need to have hands-on experiential kind of learning in order to remember certain concepts. But along the way, we kind of got around that exploration criteria by putting in elements of experiments, getting students to predict results before showing them the actual results. Yeah, so this kind, in a way, circumvents that exploration function. Okay, so what is lacking right now is the evaluate, the very last component. All right, I'll share a little bit more about this later. Okay, on top of the 5 E's teaching approach, we also want to impart values, attitudes, as well as ethics. Now, ethics is mentioned in one of the learning outcomes by MOE. All right, so it's not been tested so far, but we need often to propose ethical solutions in some of the questions. As I said, at PSLE, it's not really been tested. Ethics, for example, if I want to control the population of frogs in the environment, do I scatter poison all over, or do I make use of what I've learned by examining the life cycles of the frog and then proposing interventions at certain stages of its life cycle? So that is the ethical solution, right? So the end goal is for every child to be a self-motivated and resourceful learner. Okay, online pedagogy is somewhat different from a classroom kind of physical classroom pedagogy. So we try to get students involved in the learning process. They contribute the content knowledge so that essentially when they help to produce the contents to a certain extent, they will remember better. All right, so we also try to allow them to apply the concepts very quickly over here. So if they learn something today, they'll be tested at the end of the lesson or even the next, and repeated testing over the next few lessons. Okay, so we have a lot of engagement through interactive chat, inquiry, questioning by students, and which we try to address along the way. So we want every child to be seen, not just to have the opportunity to be seen and heard, but to want to be seen and heard. All right. If you have attended or sat in with your child during our lectures, you realize that some pupils tend to be more vocal than others. All right. So delve a little bit more about this later. Okay. So we also in our lessons we want to infuse skills for students to cope with the examinations, and this is what everyone is here for. We want every pupil to be able to analyze information critically, and the end goal is to be able to manage the structured question component of in other words, booklet B. Right? A lot of pupils have difficulty in this area because they look at the question, they know the concepts, They know what is required, but there is this lack of inertia. They cannot, those know how to start, where to start, what are the precise words to use. And this is where we come in. We have a prescribed framework, which I'll share with you later, as well as several templates that they can use when they can identify certain question types. All right, essentially a lot of words here. I won't go through everything. What we want to drive our pupils towards is to achieve content mastery as well as subject mastery. Now, most pupils enjoy science because they get to go outdoors at P3, pick up leaves, compare leaves, and all that. Somehow along the way, they lose interest. There's a disconnect between enjoying science and being assessed during science examinations. Okay, so this is where we want to try to bridge that gap to allow pupils to like science and do well in science. This is where the subject mastery comes in on top of being aware of the contents. They must be able to manage this subject well so that they will have an overall appreciation and affinity for this subject. Okay, what is content mastery? Now, essentially, just an example, this is what a pupil's attempt at describing the water cycle in blue on the board here. And then through this diagnostic summary, we try to close the learning gaps of pupils. Okay, so what happened here was that the pupil presented in blue, and then we tried, these are the learning gaps in the pupil's understanding of the water cycle, and these are presented in the green, boxed up green texts. So content mastery is not just knowing about the water cycle, but being able to make connections, meaningful connections across topics. For instance, water cycle is not just water cycle in isolation, but when they learn about the respiration process, which produces or releases water vapor into the environment, that also contributes to the water cycle. And then water cycle is also related to the cycles in the states of matter. Yeah, so all these connected connections among the topics must be there. Now, there is a difference in terms of content mastery, because being able to master science is being able to make use of the contents that all of students are, most of them are very proficient at knowing the contents. For example, light travels in a straight line. It is very simple. Just being able to apply these simple concepts in a given situation to be able to respond precisely to answer a specific question. And of course, this is the end goal. Here, we want them to be able to reflect for the purpose of self-examination and development. In other words, what I mean here is that when they look at their questions that they have written, or not the answers that they have written, they must be able to look at it, look at the question, and gauge whether they have been on track in responding to the question. So this is one notch up from being just a pupil, but being an assessor. Okay, if you're not already aware, this is the format of the booklet, the science paper at PSLE. Now, in schools, of course, sometimes for because of the lack of contents, some schools may have half paper or even 60% paper, and they have fewer questions. It depends on us, but on them. But this is the format at PSLE, and it's split into life science and physical science, 50% each. Okay, at TCher, this is what we do. The sequence of topics, we don't have a prime P3 curriculum yet. We start from P4 all the way to P6. All right, so we carry out the lessons in this order: cycles in matter, light, and then heat. And then you realize that there's a big gap from here to the end of the year, and this is where we bring in all the P3 topics to revise for revision. So at the end of P4 curriculum, pupils will be quite knowledgeable in terms of these three topics, as well as what they had learned in primary 3. Moving on to the upper block topics. Now we carry out this is the sequence in which we carry out our lessons. The topics I understand that not every school follow this sequence. So if your child has a very different sequence in primary 5 from what I'm showing over here, please come to us, and if we can form, we have the resources to form a new class, we will try our best to do that. Okay, but this sequence is what makes the best sense in terms of how many schools, as well as how I view it. We want to get the physical science components out of the way first, because when they're younger, it's easier for them to manage the physical components of science lessons. Physical science means that things that they can see, they can experience around them. When they move into life science, it becomes not so tangible anymore. For example, cell systems. The textbook shows cells that are very colorful, but when they go to the microscope, there's a disconnect because they see cells, and essentially it's very hard to see cells through a microscope even. And cells are not something that I can just look at my hand and look at the cells within there. It's not possible. So they have to imagine to a certain extent. So we get the physical science out of the way first before we introduce the life sciences components. Okay, and P6, this is what we do. These four topics were not included in 2020, but will be back in 2021 with a vengeance. Okay, now our lectures, what we do for our lectures, for 9 months this year, we carried out just lectures, okay, essentially lessons. Now, our pupils probably do not quite understand the differences between lectures and tutorials, but because this is a very tertiary term, okay, we know what lectures and tutorials are. We attend lectures 200-300 people, and then tutorials like 10 people. So there is different types of learning taking place. Now, for lectures for new topics, we span across 3 to 5 lessons, depending on the difficulty level as well as the contents, amount of contents for the topic. When we revise a topic, it's between 1 to 3. Again, it depends on the level of difficulty as well as feedback from teachers that carry out. For example, Chame came out to say, hey, heat not enough, I need one more lesson. Then I create another lesson. So a lot of things are not set in stone, but subject to review still. Okay, our lectures include a practice session at the end of every topic. So for example, if it's a 4-part series, 3 lessons will be just strictly a lot of delivery, whereas the last lesson will be just a drill and practice session. Okay, and within the ClassIn app itself, there are a number of tools that we make use of. Later on, I'll just demo a few of these tools. Okay, there's class discussion, feedback, using the teaching tools, and generally there are worksheets uploaded for the discussion questions. Okay, these are for pupil references. Now in this, hang on a second, this year we had a few pupils who actually submitted their work for us to take a look at, and which I obliged because there are just a handful, if I can remember their names, the P6 students who diligently submitted their work for me to mark every week. Colette, Phoebe, and Clarice. Yeah, 3 of them. So I didn't mind, there are only 3. But when the volume picks up, it might not be possible. Okay, this structure, this lecture structure is actually good enough for pupils to excel in science. Okay, to achieve subject content as well as subject mastery. But this is provided they are very motivated and very independent. Okay, what I mean by that, okay, when their cameras are left on, I can see them flipping through the materials that I've sent them. So in other words, they've printed, they've attempted the questions. So as I go through, they are self-marking, and then with the cameras on, you can also see their puzzled looks. Sometimes when I say certain things that they don't quite understand, and they clarify immediately. Now, these are the very motivated and very independent learners. But having said that, there will be also this group of pupils who leave their cameras off, because this is an online virtual learning, it's very hard to enforce. For example, I can't say, hey, for example, Ethan, turn on your mic or your camera. I cannot enforce that. That's where we need your help eventually, right? In our tutorial sessions, which I'll share later. So if one of you like just disappear, walk away from your computer, and come back like half an hour later, the teacher does not know. Okay, it's not like a regular classroom where I can walk up to a student who is not paying attention and say, "Hey, take out your book and start working on the question now." No, it's not the same. So if a student is like on the phone playing some games while the camera is off, I really would not know that. Okay. Now, that is where we started this tutorial because we realized that we want to meet the needs of this segment of pupils who need this extra pushing. So essentially, tutorials are the follow-up topical practice based on the weekly lectures. So they are synchronized with the lectures, except in situations where we are preparing the pupils to take examinations. Then the tutorial sessions will include topics that are to be tested. Okay, so more topics. In this case, these tutorial sessions are not quite synchronized with the lectures. Tutorials slower paced and with more individualized attention. Okay, our worksheets will always include multiple choice questions and structured questions. At the moment, it's 8-4, which I feel is a good mix given the 1 hour limitation, plus minus thereabouts. Okay, from this, after this week, we will be sharing with pupils how they can download the worksheet as well as submit their completed worksheet via the Class In app. Okay, we don't want to introduce another application that you need to download and use, etc. P3 topics, yes, sorry, okay, just, I think Andrew brought that up. Yes, we do cover some P3 topics in P6 revision, but not the very simple things like how to classify things. These are essentially like diversity of living and non-living things, which they don't really need to know. They have acquired that skill, but they need to know like types of living things. So we will cover all these in P6, yes. So back to this. Now, for tutorials, what we are trying to get done is to actually have this assessment components, the evaluation components. Remember, part of one of the last component of the 5 E's, evaluate. So we want to evaluate pupils' work and give relevant feedback for them to improve. Okay, and this is strictly, I would say, just for the structured questions, because MCQs will go along with the flow as in what happens in a regular school or enrichment center, and most MCQs are self-marked. Whereas the structured question is the one that creates problem because most of the time the students' answers are different from what is proposed or suggested. So it might be correct for all we know. So it needs some analysis or assessment based on that. Okay, in tutorials, we make use of more pupil-centric tools within the app itself. For example, we have this small blackboard text and drawing tools. We have group discussions, which we have started with our primary fours and getting them to present also. We started this after the exams because these lessons were all enrichment based. Okay, now just a quick demo on multiple choice questions. For example, if I have a MCQ, I will open up a text selector like this, and then students can click on the answer. Okay, I'll just give you a couple of minutes to look at the question, and I explain why the question is set this way when you can pick more than one option. And generally, if you're set in with your child, you might have noticed like a countdown timer, so that the child is aware that he or she cannot take forever because of the 1 hour limitation. So with this thing where you can pick more than one answer, the pupils do not know how many to pick. So sometimes they ask, how many correct answers are there? Now, if you are familiar with the school assessment papers as well as assessment books from popular bookstores and all that, they always have this format. For example, option 1 is A and B only, 2 A and C. So we are very familiar with this kind of testing criteria. It's also PSLE is also this kind of format. Now this one is actually meant to help pupils eliminate answers. Okay, but oftentimes it leaves learning gaps. This is the learning gap that I was talking about earlier. For example, if I'm a pupil and I know that for sure that option D is not correct, so what I can do, I straight away cross out 3 and 4 because I know D is incorrect. So that leaves me with only options 1 and 2, and then from there I can analyze, hey, I need to make a choice between B and C. I don't even need to know about A, right? So I just have to read these two options and pick between B and C. A lot of pupils can get this question correct without understanding part A. If you know the psyche of pupils, a lot of them, when they get an answer correct, they switch off. So they don't pay attention anymore to the explanation behind the question. All right. So that's why we like to have this kind of testing criteria format for MCQ where they can pick more than one option. So that they have to analyze every option. Okay, this is a drawing tool that and all of you will see a board being sent to you, right? Now this is part of a question. This is not the complete question. Of course, this is the simple part, and then it increases in difficulty level. So if we have one bulb connected to one battery, the light intensity is 5 units. So students have to draw wires to complete the circuit such that each bulb is lit with a brightness of less than 5 units. So this drawing board is sent to pupils and they start drawing. Now, if you look at your own platform, you will see a variety of tools there that allow you to draw freehand or straight lines or even put text there, right? So as you're drawing, I can actually scroll through different pupils' work. All right, right. I can see A and B has done. Okay, and this is what essentially what every child goes through. They have the freedom to draw, try to connect the circuit.
And we can also tell the teacher, like Sherwin, can tell how many students have drawn and submit, right?
Yeah, so as you're drawing and all that, I can actually scroll through pupil by pupil to look at your work. Okay, so at the end of the specified time, I will just collect the board. When I collect the board, the pupils cannot draw it and continue with the work. Okay, so I've collected the board, and I might choose to share work done by different pupils. Let me see if I can recall. There. So this is done by Jaden Y. Okay, then I will go through the process of analyzing his completed work. So yes, positive terminal. Yes, metal casing, metal tip, metal casing, metal tip, and to the negative terminal. So this is correct. All right, so if there are fewer pupils, I might be able to go through everyone's work in class so that everyone gets to see their friends' drawings. Yeah, not to embarrass anyone, but for the sake of learning, because there are definitely alternative answers compared to this, right? Okay. Okay, let's move on to the text board, which is similar to the drawing board, just that you use text. Okay, state two advantages of connecting bulbs A and C in this arrangement shown here. Right, so over there you have the option to start typing. Now you might see now that certain the board may be blocking part of the text board. the slides that I've shown. So essentially, it's best that your child uses a laptop or a desktop um, compared to a smaller device like an iPad or even a phone. Now, when you use a phone, it is very difficult to manage different screens and maneuver within that kind of environment. So we do not suggest that. Yeah. So for the best learning experience, please make use of a desktop or at least a laptop. Okay, this is what I meant by leave your microphones on, because when you're up there above, you are muted automatically. So when pupils raise their hands and I pull them down, they become unmuted and they can speak directly. So you can actually leave your microphones turned on. There's no fear of having the sounds in your homes being picked up. All right. Okay, so let's collect this back, and then of course I will share certain pupils' works. For example, Raynan, I think he has typed a lot in caps. Where is Raynan? There, he's screaming his answers. When bulb B fuses, the rest of the bulbs will still remain lit. Okay, essentially most pupils will have this answer. When one bulb fuses, the other one can remain lighted. All right, but at TCher we propose a few different alternatives. Okay, this is the most commonly, it's in red because almost every pupil knows this. When one bulb fuses, the others can remain lit. Actually, can remain lit is not really a correct answer, but it's better to phrase does not affect the others. Where's the other here? Because there's only one other bulb. Okay. Now it also allows the independent control of bulbs. That means I can turn on and off each bulb separately. Also allows the easy identification and replacement of a bulb that has fused. All right. So let's move on. Now this is the crack framework that we make use of at TCher for pupils to manage open-ended question. Now at P6, we try to do more of this crack framework approach. Well, what essentially is it? Well, a lot of pupils are very familiar with the CER, claim evidence reasoning approach. And we are not reinventing the wheel here. We are actually adding on to the CER approach. Okay, the CER approach, if you don't know, is a claim. Making a claim, for example, material B is the most suitable. Okay, there's a claim. Evidence, I have to go and look at the question, look at the table, the graphs, or even the question stamp to pull out evidence from the question given to me. And reasoning means I make use of the evidence to try to support the claim. So this is the CER approach. It is recognized internationally, okay, not just in Singapore. Now, at TCher, we make use of this claim approach, crack approach, which is a more components compared to the CER approach. Okay, claim essentially we added in choice, all right, and criteria, because claim is something that is a bit difficult to understand from the pupil's perspective. Claim can be okay. The rate of photosynthesis increased. This is a claim. Okay, choice like material B is the most suitable for this purpose. Criterion, for example, suggest one way to increase the number of bubbles rising to the surface. So this is to meet a certain condition. Okay, evidence and reasoning is we put it under A, analysis and explanation. And on top of the CR, we do have three other components: the recollection, correctness, and keywords. Let me explain what these are. Okay, recollection of concepts. Now, this was a PSLE question, I think in 2016 or 18. I can't quite recall this morning. Now, what the question was about, when we have this ride at an amusement park, which cannot take kids that are more than 50 kilograms. Okay, it becomes dangerous. Now we have this platform that's designed to check the mass. So if a child who is too heavy, steps on this platform, and the bulb lights up, then he is too heavy, he cannot take the ride. Okay, so an engineer suggested that this design was not safe. It would be safer if the bulb lighted up when a child who's of acceptable mass steps on it, and give a reason why the design was not safe. Now, this is the answer proposed by a publisher. Okay, at this point in time, I'd just like to say that MOE releases only the questions after PSLE. They don't give the answers. Okay, because there's like a, let's say, opening a can of worms, because they subject themselves to scrutiny. They don't want that. Okay. Okay, now, proposed by the publisher, two springs may compress unequally, this one and this one here, the two springs, causing the child to fall. Now, the thing is that you don't really have to study science for 4 years to come up with a response like that. So this was not the answer. A plus B to the power of 3. Pupils must recall what they have learned. And what they learned actually is they're all very simple concepts. For example, a bulb, if they go back to think about what they learned in P5, a bulb can fuse, right? When the filament breaks or melts. So the scientifically correct response is that if the bulb fuses, it will not light up. In other words, if the bulb is spoiled, someone who is 60 kilograms steps on the platform, the bulb doesn't light up, so he can take the ride, and the ride becomes dangerous because of the excess mass. All right. Now, publishers have also proposed an answer. For example, I think another publisher says that they should use extension spring instead of compression spring. Now, that is kind of beyond a 12-year-old child's ability to come up with a proposal like that. And if you think about it, proposing a solution to this problem is actually not answering the question, because the question wants to know why wasn't the design safe, or they did not ask you to propose something that is better. So for those pupils taking PSLE that particular year, some of them just wrote the bulb fuse, 3 words, and they got the 1 mark. Okay. Now C, what is C? C is the correctness of the answer. Have I answered the question? This is another PSLE question, part B of, now, we all know that when we release a balloon that has been blown up, it flies in very random directions. Okay, this question requires them, pupils, to explain why, if there's no wind in the room, why didn't it fly in a straight line? And a lot of pupils that year gave this answer. Gravity acted on the balloon, and therefore the balloon did not fly in a straight line. But have I answered the question? The thing is that no. This only answers the part where the balloon was going downwards, in other words, here. It doesn't explain why the balloon went upwards if there's gravity, right? So in terms of correctness of answer, this is incorrect. So if they were to recall what they have learned, a force is a push or a pull. Now this is what they learned in the very first lesson, like Forces 101. First lesson of forces. Force is a push or pull, and the effects of forces, what can a force do? Stop a moving object, start a stationary object, change the speed and direction of a moving object. Okay, so they've recalled this and proposed this answer. Air that came out from the balloon pushed it in different directions. That is all. They need the keywords push and different directions to get that 1 mark. Right, so they need to recall and they need to see whether the answers are correct. Now, what does K represent? K represents keywords. All right, for example, if we know the topic on water cycle has a lot of very important keywords that must be included. Okay, so this question was essentially about a lot of fans being placed around a swimming pool area to speed up the rate of evaporation of the puddles so that the swimming pool area does not become slippery. Okay, then we have a boy who is already feeling cold, but when the fan blows on him, he feels even colder. The proposed answer was okay. This is not proposed answer. This is what I like to do. Like to give incomplete answers to the pupils to check for the correctness of this. Right. So if you look at this, the strong wind increased the rate of evaporation from his body. Water on his body evaporated and caused him to feel colder. Let me know if this is a 2-mark question. How many marks do you think this answer deserves? Most of you agree that this answer does not actually deserve 2 marks. Okay, but let me tell you, there are 3 components missing here. Okay, when you talk about evaporation, or when rather pupils talk about evaporation, they have to say what evaporates. Not coffee, not tea, not muddy water, not seawater, but water. Right? In this case, it's the water droplets on his body. And then water on his body evaporated. Before talking about evaporation, they have to include heat gain or heat loss when it's in relation to condensation. So there's another component part there that is missing. And finally, after evaporation, what is the result? What is being formed? Water vapor. So there are 3 major parts being missed out here. So if you look at this being a 2-mark question, I would say it's just 0.5 marks, because half mark deducted here, here, and here. Although it looked complete at first glance. All right. Okay. Now this crack framework is a very difficult thing to use. Even the CRR in itself is quite difficult. So of course we have easier questions, more standard type of questions that we can make use of certain templates. For example, explaining fair test. If you look at the image here, now this is using the crack framework. Crack framework are meant for those more challenging questions. And if you look at this here, it's a very good tool, but can be quite cumbersome. All right. Now, the science paper comprises many fruits on low-lying branches. In other words, questions that are easier. So the low-hanging fruits are more straightforward, and they can make use of structured templates to attempt. Okay. I just give 3 examples of templates. Stating aim, to find out how or to find out if. They structure it to find out. Now, the use of how and if, actually, I do teach that at primary 6 in one of the lead-ups to the PSLE paper, the differences between how and if. Okay, but this is a very secondary school thing, which I don't think will be tested at PSLE. The difference is here, example, to find out how light intensity affects the rate of photosynthesis. That means I do have a range of independent variable, like 10 units of light, 15 units of light, 20 units, 50, 100 units. So I have a range of variables to test the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, to find out if, so the independent variable is either present or not present. Okay, to find out if fungi need water to survive. So water is either present or absent. So this is the difference between how and if. Generally, at school level, you can use how and if interchangeably. But I was quite surprised when a parent shared that her child was penalized for using the wrong one at P5. So it is not, as I said, this is a very secondary school thing. PSLE also does not test on stating aim. All right. Okay, explaining fair test. How did using the same type of soil ensure that Jim had carried out a fair test? Of course, that's following the question stem. Now, a lot of pupils, when they see the word fair test, they like to regurgitate an answer. In this instance, it's like in a fair test, only one variable is changed. The amount of water is already changed in this experiment, so the type of soil must be kept the same. Now, if you look at this kind of answer, this is not what at PSLE level, this is not what they are looking out for. Things that are memorized and regurgitated. Okay, so you need to apply the concept of a fair test in a template format like this. Okay, the blank will reflect the blank. So this is a template that I share with pupils. If you look back at the regurgitated answer, it actually does not answer how did using that one ensure, how did that action ensure that a fair test was carried out. This was more of explaining what a fair test is. Okay, so what was kept the same, the type of soil will affect what was being measured, for example, height of plant. Now this height of plant will be taken from the question stem itself. Okay, whatever is given there. Could be the health of the plant, the color of the leaves, the number of new leaf grows. Now, so this is another template that we use, inferring relationships, templates that are used. For example, the more the amount of water, the taller the plants. Or as the amount of water increases, the height of the plants increases. Okay, most pupils can manage this template to describe relationships. So what we do, we highlight pointers for them to look out for. For example, not to mix up the cause and the effect, because that's a 0 mark straight away. Also to copy out the exact phrase when stating the effect, what was being measured. If the question states height of plants after 5 days, then the pupils must write height of plants after 5 days. If they just write height of plants, like the more the amount of water given, the greater the height of the plant. That is a little bit risky because the pupil has missed out after 5 days. So essentially they have to just copy the entire phrase given to them. Now, in terms of parent involvement at TCher, now make use of email as a resource. Okay, science at TCher, TCher spelled with triple R here, .com. If you have questions related to the lesson, if your child has phrased a structured question in a way that is different from what we have suggested, you can check with us. And if you have sat in with your child, you might have noticed that we do have a parent summary at the end where sometimes we do propose or suggest activities that you can carry out with your child after the lesson. Now, I would like to make a comment about answer keys provided from vendors as well as publishers. Okay, now you buy like top schools paper, sometimes the answer keys are inaccurate, so you might want to check them with us. Make use of our science@tcher.com resource to check. Now, a lot of these answer keys are taken from pupils' corrections, not supplied by schools. I don't think the schools will dare to give you their answer keys. So they take the corrections from pupils and they give it to you. If the pupils didn't do their corrections properly, then you get the wrong answer. Okay, so when we move into the tutorial, and if your child has signed up for the tutorial in 2021, you might want to help your child to download the worksheets as well as scan and upload the completed worksheet. And of course, you have to meet certain timeline. Give us some time to take a look and to give feedback. For example, if the lesson is at 8 o'clock and you give us the worksheet, or we receive the worksheet at 7:30, there's no way we can give feedback and upload because we need time to prepare for the lesson also. All right. Now, help to ensure that the camera is turned on in tutorials. All right. Most of us, even for me, when I go for Zoom meetings, of course, I prefer my camera to be turned off. That means I can multitask. I can do a lot of other things. But if you like us to eyeball your child, you can help by ensuring that your child's camera is turned on, so that if your child is not with us, walked away, doing something else, we can call out your child and ask him or her to be more attentive in that sense. Right? So these are the things that we request. Okay, now over at TCher, for science, we do have a very dynamic curriculum. We base a lot of our materials on the past PSLE questions, and we do have our analysis of past year questions in terms of topics. Now, we don't really share this with pupils or with parents. So what I've shown here are 2012 to 2014, so you don't know the latest one. Reason being, we don't want pupils to spot questions because primary content is very little already. So if you spot questions, it becomes worse. So we want pupils to learn everything. And then, of course, at our end, we know what is important, what is not important, not what is less important. Okay, what differentiates our science curriculum from that from a regular enrichment center? Okay, as I said, uh, we do have a dynamic curriculum. We keep changing the curriculum, but of course, the 2020 paper will be somewhat different because of the topics that have been excluded. So we won't base our scheme of work on that, but of course, we'll look at 2018 and after. All right. Now, our lessons are planned and written to maximize online learning. And of course, we look at the assessment questions that are and what is being tested in schools as well as at PSLE. So generally, after PSLE, or after the school prelims, we zoom in on PSLE, what is tested at PSLE. Before that, we might teach more because we know that some schools are still testing things like, for example, why did so-and-so, why did Andrew repeat the experiment 3 times? So this is a memorized and regurgitated answer. So this kind of answers, questions are not tested at PSLE. So after the school prelims, we will take away all these kind of questions that are tested in schools regularly, but never at PSLE. Okay, so we'll zoom in. So if I set in some of my lessons, if you had a primary 6 child, you might have noticed that I've said some things like, okay, this one you don't understand, never mind, let's move on. And that's because I know that that kind of questions are not tested. All right. Okay. We make use of a lot of unconventional questions to test understanding and students' ability to apply concepts at a deeper level because we know that PSLE questions are very creative. So we try to create our own collection of difficult questions also, right? Sorry, the word just eluded me. Okay, of course, PSLE skills are very high level, but we do some cascading of these skills for P5s as well as at P4s. And there's a balance of learning engagements and practice. At the back of our minds when we design the curriculum is always to get the child excited to come for lesson and to be excited to stay on and not be distracted by phone games or whatever things that are around them. And our lessons are all open door. You are invited to sit with your child, to monitor or to learn with your child. So it's not like a closed door enrichment center where you park your child there for 2 hours and you don't know what's happening behind the closed doors, right? So everything here is open. And that is all I have for you. Thank you very much.